Hello and welcome to another Java tutorial. In this tutorial, I'm going to continue our discussion on LaTeX for Java developers, and I think we're at the point that we're going to start implementing our LatexRenderer class in Java, and we mentioned that the job of the LatexRenderer is to create a text file based on the structure of a text document, which starts with a document class command, some preambles for using packages, configuring packages, and some other commands, and then the document environment, which includes the main text, anything that is part of our main document, for example raw text, equation environments, figure environments, table environments, etc. right? And we said that in order to execute, after creating the text file, we have to feed it to PDF LaTeX or any type of LaTeX typesetter in Java, and for that we need to run a terminal command. And we saw that the runtime class in Java provides us a very easy way to do that. We use the exec method, and then we said that we have to be careful about the working directory with which we execute our terminal command. That's because first of all, if you're running from within your IDE, the IDE usually sets the working directory to some specific path, and you have to be careful about that, because the output of the PDF LaTeX or any LaTeX typesetter, which is an auxiliary file, a log file, a PDF file, is going to be placed inside the working directory with which you're running your terminal commands, right? And we said that if one variant of the exec command that takes a string, which is the full command, and some array of strings as the environment parameters, and a file representation of the working directory. And we saw an example of how this would help us to set the working directory when we are running our terminal command. This was an example. We can create a file that represents where the text file is, and we normally want to put the output of the PDF LaTeX in the same directory that the text file is, and then we pass in this file object text directory to our exec and create the command is PDF LaTeX plus whatever the full name of the file is, right? All right, so let's head to Eclipse and try to work on our LatexRenderer class. So in the LaTeX4j project, at the top level, I have this LatexRenderer class, and in the base package so far we've seen the command object that basically represents a general type of command, and we said that, for example, we can inherit from this, and then basically create specific classes for specific LaTeX commands, like using a package or adding a label or adding a reference, right? And then basically now we also have a general top class for environment. An environment starts with begin, the name, ends with end name of the environment, and some square bracket options. And inside that we can have other LaTeX commands such as label or some raw text or some stuff that are specific to the environment. For example, inside a figure environment, we can have a command that adds a figure to our text, and we will see that in the future lectures. So for now, LatexRenderer. So in the LatexRenderer, we want to have a typesetter and also the number of runs, how many times we're going to run this typesetter on our LaTeX file. And we also discuss why sometimes we need to run more than one time. For example, feed the text file to the PDF LaTeX and run it more than one time. Usually it has to do with references, citations, and this kind of stuff. So output path, we're going to set it by default to dot, which is the working directory, whatever is set when the JVM is run. And the output name, we can set it rendered, whatever, right? And then, so LatexRenderer one constructor takes the name of the typesetter and then number of runs. Another one sets the default typesetter name, which in this case is PDF LaTeX, number of runs 1. And we said that we want to add a method for the user to set the output path, where the output of the PDF LaTeX, which is a PDF file and some other auxiliary files, where should it be saved, and then set output name, what should be the name of the output file, right? Or output text file. So what we need to do, we need to create the document class and then add packages and then add extra preamble, add main text, run command line, and then for PDF LaTeX or any LaTeX. And obviously before that we have to first create the text file, create.tex file, right? Run command line and clean up auxiliary file. This is obviously optional, right? And if, for example, if we define a Boolean flag here for in the debug mode, by default we're going to set it to false, for example. And here, if we are in the debug mode, we most likely want to keep the auxiliary files to see what's going on. But if we are not in the debug mode, we are going to we probably want to clean up the directory, only keep the PDF file. So public void debug, debug boolean flag, and this dot debug is flag. All right, so what we want to do, let's create a string builder. So a string builder, basically text file is new string builder. So this is going to, or maybe just let's call it text builder, for example. Text builder is going to build our environment or the entire text file, and after that we're going to have a file. So create text file. How are we going to do that? So file, basically text directory, we're going to create a, let's also input the file object from java.io, new file, and then we're going to give it this dot, or maybe just output path, right? This is the output path where the text file is going to be saved. And then we can also create a file for text file, new file, a string. So we get text directory, and then we add file.separator, and then plus basically output name, that's the name of the file, plus .tex. All right, so what we are going to do, so this is the name of the output, so this is the file, and then once we create this file, we have to feed this to some object that can output a text to a file, right? And there are different types. For example, we can use a buffered writer, or I'm just going to use a file writer, for example, from java.io, which writes text to character files using a default buffer size, encoding from characters by uses either a specified charset or the platform default charset, right? So I'm going to use a file writer. So let's also import it from java.io. Text writer, for example, equals let's also rename this to text builder with capital B, a new file writer, and we can feed it a file. What is this file? It's going to be a text file, right? And what are we going to, and obviously it's going to throw an IO exception, because and then what this is going to do is this is going to write this. So as text builder is going to build the entire text file. So this or builds the contents of entire .tex file, right? Using whatever we have, packages, all these classes that we have that represent LaTeX elements. And then we have this file writer. Obviously, we should call close on it, or we can put this in a try with resources. So maybe I'll try that. So try with resources is try. We create the object inside the argument of try, and then add the catch clause. All right, but then it's going to call the close on it for us automatically. So this is called try with resources. If you're not familiar with it, try with resources. Remember, file writer is using, and basically it means we're accessing a native operating system resource, which is a file, right? And when we are done, we have to close that stream, right, that resource, so that the operating system can free it up. Otherwise it's not going to free it until the JVM terminates. All right, so so file writer, text writer, new file writer, and then we're going to say that we're just going to say text writer dot write, and it's going to take a string. What is this string? It's going to our text builder dot toString, right? And I guess if we don't call the toString, it's going to call the toString for us on it. No, it's not. So we're just going to manually call the toString on it. And when we're done, it's going to close it, so there is no resource leak, right? So calls basically close method automatically. So there is no resource leak. And now we write our text file. So what else we're going to do? Run command line. So the story is that, so we create our string, which is our command, and it's going to be a typesetter, right? The name of the typesetter plus some space plus whatever our text file is, right? So text file, text file get absolute path, right? And then this is going to output the result of the whatever LaTeX typesetter we choose. The outputs are going to be saved in the working directory that the JVM launches, right? For example, from within Eclipse, we've seen that it sets the project directory, and that's not what we want, right? We want to make sure that the output of the PDF LaTeX or any typesetter here, it's saved to the same directory in which the text file is. So we're going to use the variations of the runtime. So runtime is runtime class get runtime, right? We get the runtime, and obviously we can use a var here or just write the runtime here. And then we're going to say runtime exec, and we use the variation that specifies a file directory as the working directory when running the terminal command. So we have the command. We're not going to add any environment variable for now, and the directory is going to be text directory. All right, and this is obviously going to throw some IO exceptions. And then what do we want to do? We want to for now so we have this debug, and then let's also boolean print warnings. Let's set this to true. And these are the LaTeX warnings. If you recall, LaTeX, when we run it, it can give us some warning, LaTeX warnings, right? So if we are in the debug mode, if debug, we're going to print all the outputs, right? So I'm going to create, so this returns a process when we execute. So process P equals this. And then if we are in the debug mode, we're going to create a scanner class, a scanner. I'm going to call it debug scanner, or maybe it doesn't matter because the scope of this is inside these curly brackets, new scanner, and we feed an input stream from the process. So get input stream, and remember again, I've mentioned this in the previous lectures, but input stream here means it hooks up the output of the terminal to the input of your JVM, right? That's why it's called input stream. It's input to your Java application or Java JVM, right? But this input stream actually has the contents of the output to the terminal. So when you run this command, which runs a native application, PDF LaTeX, the PDF LaTeX has a standard output, which outputs to the terminal, and that output is hooked up as an input stream to your JVM, right? And then we're going to say that while debug scanner has next or next line, doesn't matter, has next line, we're going to say that sysout debug scanner next line, right? Again, a scanner is a very easy to use or convenient interface, right? And it also does have some buffering. And I guess the default, let's check what is the default buffering size, 124, and that's about, I guess, 1000 characters, which is very good. in general. All right, so if we are in the debug mode, we're going to do anything, and then else if. So if we are debug, we're going to print everything, all the inputs, outputs of the PDF LaTeX, regardless of which includes all the warning. But if not in the debug mode, but we want to basically print warnings, then we're going to create a scanner again, but then check the lines. If so, a scanner, maybe let's call this warnings, and we probably don't need this scanner. Same here, I'm just going to rename this to debug okay, never mind, so let's not change it. So warnings, and then a new scanner, we get the input stream, warnings. While this has next line, we're going to check if that line has warnings. So we're going to put an if basically if warnings, if let's say so line or a string line equals warnings. So maybe we get the line, so a string line is warnings next line, right? We get the line, and then we check if the line has some sort of pattern. So if line contains, for example, a string which says contains warning, or maybe capital line, or maybe we can just line to lowercase to make sure that if the LaTeX outputs warning with capital V or whatever, and then we're going to do a sysout line. All right, and remember, this line is the original one, so when we call the to lowercase, this actually returns a new string, right? It doesn't mutate or change the original string, right? So what about if we don't want to do anything? So if we don't want to do anything, we're going to just do a empty while loop, right? So that we make sure that the LaTeX finishes. So a scanner output, and then while output has next line, we're not going to do anything. And this is basically just waiting for LaTeX to finish, right? Because we have to wait until LaTeX finishes, so that but in order to do that, we have to make sure that we just say output dot next line, right? We just go through the lines so that all the outputs, PDF LaTeX or any typesetter, finishes off. So this is the case. So one for debug, one for warnings, and then one for just doing nothing, and then waiting until the PDF LaTeX finishes and we have all the output. And then if we want to clean up the auxiliary files, so let's say we want the default mode. So if not debug, if we are in the debug mode, we're not going to clean up anything. But if we are in the debug mode, we are going to basically create a file for the, so this is the auxiliary file, right? And ends with the aux, and then right, AUX. The other one, let's see here, the other one is the like file. We want to also clean it up. And then finally, we want to also probably clean up the text file itself, right? So when we create a file, we just say aux file delete on exit, for example, when the JVM terminates and the program successfully runs. Because when we get to this point, we have already waited for the PDF LaTeX to finish off, right? Because we've iterated through all the outputs, and this is safe to delete. So like file dot delete on exit, and we wanted to also delete or take file delete on exit. All right, so we clean up the folder, we only keep a PDF file at the end. So let's go ahead and try to test this. So what I'm going to do here is create a document class. So LatexRenderer, for example, here public void set document, and we're going to get a basically object or text, right? We're going to get a string which is the document class, and we're going to say that here what we're going to do here, we are going to have the style, so a structure of LaTeX class. Or for now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just basically try to try to create some stuff, empty stuff, and then or manual stuff, and just test, make sure that everything works fine here. And then after that, we are going to implement the full structure of the LaTeX document, right? LaTeX file. All right, so I'm going to just say var, for example, doc class, new command, and the command is going to be document class, lowercase, and arg is going to be article, and doc class add option 12 pt. So this is our document class, and then TextBuilder append doc class, and it's going to call the toString on it for us. And then we don't have any packages, any preambles, the main text. In the main text, we're going to have doc environment, for example, document environment, new environment, and the name of the environment is document. And then doc environment, add text, for example, and in the text I'm going to use a multi-line string. This is a simple test of LatexRenderer in Java. All right, so and then when we get this, we also add this to the TextBuilder append, and then doc environment, and it automatically calls the toString on this. So right now our document or barebone document is created, right? The first line or the first command that the very first thing that we do, we issue a command to LaTeX to what kind of template we're using. And then right now we don't have any packages, any extra preambles, and then the main text is just a document environment, and then it has some one line of text. And yeah, so I hope I think this is going to work fine. Let's go and create a class, test LatexRenderer, and we want to have main method here, and test1, right? And public static void test1, and I'm going to create a new folder here. So let's call this tutorial _7, and so I'm going to create a LaTeX renderer. I'm going to call it LaTeX new LaTeX renderer, and let's go. This is the typesetter PDF LaTeX, and number of runs 1. So far we have not implemented the number of runs, and the way the number of runs is going to work is it's going to basically after we save the file, it's going to run this. So we can put all of these inside a method, correct? We can say private void run LaTeX. We're going to let's see, take file, take directory, and then so we're going to pass in this file, take file, or take dir, and file, take file, right? So this is the private method. Did we need to do anything else? So we create the take file, we run the command line, right? And then if check debug, we're going to clean that, right? All right, so for now, this number of runs is still 1. So LaTeX dot set output name. Let's call it tutorial tutorial 7, right? That's the name of the take, and then PDF file, etc. LaTeX set output path. And I'm going to use I know that I'm running from within Eclipse, so it's going to be relative to my project folder. So I'm going to say go inside to LaTeX tutorials, and then in the tutorial _7, and then LaTeX dot render. All right, so let's see if this works. And let's refresh this. What do we have now? We only have our PDF. So this was a very successful run. So everything was cleaned up. The take file was cleaned up. So if I say LaTeX dot debug true, all right, and let's delete this. So let's run this. As you can see now, it prints the entire output of the PDF LaTeX, and there is no warnings here. If I set this to false, and as you can see, because we ran in the debug mode, all the files were saved. We didn't delete them, which is very good thing for debugging. For example, you want to know what actually happened in your take file, you can see what's going on, right? So this is a simple test of LaTeX renderer in Java. So we've done it successfully. And so what I'm going to do here now, let's comment this. And we said that in order to run, we add this private run LaTeX, take directory, and take file. All right, and what we're going to do is for int I equals 0, I less than number of runs, I plus plus, LaTeX run LaTeX. So what happens here is that note that we have to be careful when we run multiple times. We shouldn't save the take file multiple times, right? So I shouldn't call the render method multiple times, because each time I call it, it creates the basically the take file again and again, and that's not what I want, right? I want to create the take file only once, which that's what I'm doing right in the LaTeX. I could also just put all of this into a method, but then because I'm passing this take directory and take file here, then maybe it's better to create it right here. And it's just a few lines of code. That's very easy. And later on, we want to do a cleanup. So let's also make sure that this method works fine. So we are not in the debug. So let's run this. And everything is working fine. And then if we refresh this, we should get only our PDF file. Everything else is deleted when the JVM terminates. That's the whole idea of file delete on exit. So delete on exit requests that the file or directory denoted by this abstract path name be deleted when the virtual machine terminates. And that's what we want, right? When the virtual machine terminates, we are sure that the PDF LaTeX has finished running, has finished creating. And the reason is we wait, even if we are not doing in the debug mode or we don't want to print any warnings, we are still doing an empty iteration on the output of the PDF LaTeX. So once the JVM terminates, we are 100% sure that the PDF LaTeX has finished its job, and all the files, auxiliary files, PDF files have been created and saved, and now therefore we can we can delete this safely, right? So we delete the auxiliary file, like file, take file. Maybe we can also request that we save the sync file, but right now from the command line there is no sync file generated, so we don't need to worry about that, right? But if you're writing a Swing application and you want to implement that sync functionality between your text editor and the PDF viewer, then you can also, and even for example this GUI Tech Shop also has this interface that you can delete the auxiliary files. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this lecture. We will definitely continue improving this LaTeX renderer and exploring in depth the capabilities of LaTeX in the future lectures. So please stay tuned, and I'll see you in the next one.